this introduction. This is merely perfunctory. I'm going through an anthropological ritual like any good academic. Because Fred is so well known that he really does not need my pitiable introduction. But nevertheless, I will go through this anthropological ritual. He is currently the director of the Project for Undertold Stories, a program that combines international journalism and teaching. He has served as with the news hour since 1985 and is a regular contributor and substitute anchor for the PBS's Religion and Ethics news weekly. He has also directed films from India and the Democratic Republic of Congo for the acclaimed documentary series Wide Angle. Fred has also reported from 62 countries, from Haiti to Sub-Saharan Africa to South Asia, and he has focused on stories that are underreported in the mainstream US media. In addition to regularly covering AIDS, public health concerns, development issues, and social entrepreneurship, he led the first American crew to report on the crisis in Sudan's Darfur region. I am delighted that we were able to partner with the media school to bring Fred over here for this talk, and I am deeply grateful for the assistance that the media school has provided to make this possible. I would be remiss if I didn't quickly mention that next week we also have a lecture in the same lecture series that Fred is participating in, our lecture series, and Nuno Monteiro of Yale University will speak here next Friday, the 5th, on the strategic causes of nuclear proliferation. We're going to turn to an entirely different subject, but that is part of the lecture series organized by the Center on American and Global Security. Fred's talk today is entitled Making the Foreign Less Foreign, the Undertold Stories Project. Without any further ado, Fred, the floor is yours.
Well, that was a very kind introduction, ritual or not. I'm not used to it. I've gotten a lot worse than that. And one that particularly comes to mind about our work has to do with an experience a few years ago in Indonesia when we were on assignment. And typically, when I go out to a country, it's a parachute job, as we call it. We come in there for a very finite period of time, and we want to optimize our time. And we hire local journalists, typically, who are fixers, well-schooled in how to get around in a country and through its systems for reporting. And they're called fixers. They're indispensable partners in our endeavors. At any rate, there was a fixer in Jakarta who we hired who kept introducing us to everyone as a crew from CBS News. And if there's one thing we in the PBS world feel that we have left, it's our credibility and our good reputation. And so this was completely unacceptable. So about the fourth time he said CBS News, I pulled him aside and I said, look here, it's PBS, not CBS. And he paused and he said, I knew it was something BS. I've never forgotten that because that's a real truism in all of this. You've got to keep your humor. So, thanks so much again for that introduction. I want to thank our hosts in particular. I had a wonderful dinner last night with Professors Kelly and Parmeshwar at Finch's, and it was delightful. I'm really delighted to be in Bloomington. I've long admired the analysis of Professor Gambili and had the chance to actually tap it coincidentally for a piece that will be on later in February from India, and he will add a lot of great perspective to it. We actually met on an airplane last year, yes, quite by coincidence, and it's made the journey that much easier to compare notes on our respective journeys. We've come from similar places, but he went into the lofty halls of academia, and I went into what Newton Minow, the OFCC chairman, called the vast wasteland that is American television. Also in honor of our Tagore, professor, I like to start out with a quote from Rabindranath Tagore, which is sort of an exhortation that has driven me for a long time. And he wrote, "The tendency of the mind is economical. It loves to form habits and move in grooves, which save it the trouble of thinking anew at each of its steps. Ideals once formed make the mind lazy. It becomes afraid to risk its acquisitions in fresh endeavors. It tries to enjoy complete security by shutting up its belongings behind fortifications of habits." Growing up in India, the word foreign was never pejorative. Foreigners were objects of fascination to us as young people, and in particular those that came from America. This was the promised land. This is where people lived happily ever after. Those were the images we got when we went to the movies that Hollywood brought to us. I arrived in the United States in the mid-1970s, a period that, as I look back on it now, was one of the quieter ones in American immigration history. And at the same time, while there was no particular hostility that I sensed toward immigrants in those days, I didn't sense much of an embrace either. And it was particularly puzzling to me that Americans seemed to know so much less about the world beyond these shores than the other way around. And there are some explanations for it. The big export of the United States of America is images. It's, loosely speaking, Hollywood, basically. And it made also sense to me that this was a country with two important exceptions. It was created by people who wanted to fortify themselves from the rest of the world, and that's why they came here. I'm going to share an image that I'm not particularly proud of, but it ties into what I want to talk about next, and that's the condition of American television. I arrived in the United States, okay. I discovered that there was an abundance of television. This was my first fascination. There was so much television that came from the land in which there was almost none. But I quickly discovered that just as Hollywood tends to, shall we say, exaggerate about America and the rest of the world, television, so powerful in shaping public opinion and habits far more than printed media, seemed to give its audience a parochial, distorted picture of the world. What foreign news the networks covered when I was first here came mostly from the rich countries. The networks had lots of money, but they didn't spend it going to places where I come from. Rarely did I ever watch any serious news reporting from India or what we call the Third World. What coverage there was typically was of spectacular events, earthquakes or disasters, and they needed, this is serious, to be the threshold of human loss to warrant their attention and expenditure. There was one exception, which will relieve us of that image. McNeil Ware. Extra point for people who can identify which one is which. If you're under 40. McNeil Ware was an oasis, if you will, but it's primarily a studio discussion, or was a studio discussion program, very little from the field, which required resources that only the commercial networks had. I learned as I got into the business of news reporting that the developing world suffered two very damning attributes. They were expensive to reach, and even worse, they were perceived as being too foreign, too esoteric, and irrelevant to the American audience. There were no major U.S. interests involved, if you will. Today, television news, and this is the PBS NewsHour, which began as the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour. I was there then. Went on to become the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, and it's today the PBS NewsHour. But television itself has become irrelevant, a dying medium. The television, as we look at it now, is just a distribution medium, and this is a distribution hiccup. What television is evolving into, and very rapidly, is an ever more powerful medium, bringing us volumes more images and video to all screens of various sizes. The term viral has come into common use for popular video. We are part of this is the Undertold Stories project, own part of distributing video. But we're in an age where video is extremely affordable to produce. My first assignment for the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour in 1985, I flew from Minneapolis to Fargo, and then we took a rental car down 2 hours into North Dakota. And it had to be a very large car because we checked 16 pieces of luggage among 3 people to accomplish what we needed to do, technically, to produce a television report. I came back last week from India, 3 pieces of luggage for 3 people. And the video is stunning, orders of magnitude more vivid and gorgeous than what we shot back then. Video has become very affordable to produce. And anybody and everybody can and does do it. You see in this way of photographers who all look like pros, a woman in the middle who looks like she went to Best Buy or Target and brought her camera to this place. For most places, except some of the places we go to, it's also very easy to post video. This is on the border of Somalia and Ethiopia, where there are a few places in the world that we tend to go to them where it's difficult to be connected to the world. You take satellite phones here, and I had the misfortune on this trip of producing a really good report for the NewsHour. It consumed all we had to produce it, and it was going up on a portable satellite unit. And it turns out that these units do not work when it's cloudy, because the clouds impede access to the satellite. So something as silly as that can interrupt it. It's amazing how much technology affects the quality of what we can do and the timeliness. So the key question, I'm going to go back to the world map, talk about those 62 countries that our project is reported from. If you take away Russia, Canada, and the United States, it looks a lot less green up there. And that's kind of where we hang out. The key question, though, is that amid all of this abundance of technology, information, have we improved our knowledge and understanding of the world beyond these shores? Or has that abundance perhaps made things worse? I can't help but think that in the technologically humble days of Walter Cronkite, does anyone know who that is? I'll tell you that this was a television anchorman who was consistently voted the most trusted person in America. That's not going to happen again. But in the humble days of Walter Cronkite, the technologically humble days, I doubt that we had see some of the things that we're seeing today. Someone who talked about building a large concrete fortification between the United States and Mexico would have been a lead profile in a documentary about mental illness. and not one about one coming from a presidential candidate, a leading presidential candidate, if you measure it by the frenzied media attention that he is receiving. A leading candidate, if you believe the polls. We'll see. By the way, I spent a fair amount of time recently in Mexico on the subject of migration. And it's a perfect example of stories that are simplified in the political discourse when it gets really heated from what is really a very, very complex set of issues. In 2015, there was more migration southbound than northbound across the Mexican border. And the northbound migration was not of Mexicans primarily, but was of Central Americans fleeing areas that they say are just completely buried by drug wars, which in turn were drug wars that emanated at one point in Colombia and have migrated to Central America. The point I'm making is that this is a very complex story, and it can't be simplified. We need to understand it better. But it's difficult to do that in a world where we yearn for blacks and whites, but all that there is gray. How much do we really know about the world that 30% of GOP primary voters told a public policy poll recently that they would support bombing Agrabah? Presumably because it sounded like a good Muslim target to them. Even more troubling, 57% said they weren't sure in this way. Not sure, that is, about whether to bomb it, not whether it exists, which of course it does not. There is no such place. I don't mean to pick on the GOP, by the way. If this poll caught my attention, I'm not certain Democrats would do any better on the geography quiz in such a poll, or have any enlightenment specific, be any more enlightened on specific matters. I just don't know. The point I'm getting is that there's a lot out there on the internet, which, even though it's a vast source of information, the internet is a vast, vast exchange of ignorance and anger. And so much of our appetite for news of the outside world is spasmodic. It's in response to a perceived threat of violence or unfair trade competition. It was Japan in the 1980s. Then it shifted to India where the tech jobs were going, to China where manufacturing jobs are going. There's a vague sense of Agrabah out there that concerns us about security. That's more of an existential threat. And I think this is where PBS can play an important role, does play an important role in public media in general. And it's my hope that we can preserve these institutions amid all the turmoil that has affected our media industry. It remains one of the last bastions of serious journalism, reasoned discussion, not people arguing each other. And a tiny part of that is the effort we have in my presence, which is now on a university campus. This is that same shoot in Somalia, by the way. I've heard our content referred to as the spinach in the news diet. That's why that slide is up there. How do we make recipes for spinach? To make spinach acceptable, I happen to actually love spinach. And there are all kinds of fine recipes for it, but spinach has a terrible reputation. But when you start to like it, you might actually really like it. It is, and that is our challenge, to try and get this kind of content to work in television. so glad to and for the NewsHour. And I'm happy to report that amid precipitous declines in broadcast television viewership, the NewsHour has held reasonably steady, and the online NewsHour is just growing spectacularly well. And I'm just really elated to bring that news. That's the most recent news that we've had on that front. I want to now get into undertold stories. What do I mean when I say undertold stories? It's convenient, broad, and vague title. We generally divide the portfolio into three types of stories. First one is what you might call the whatever happened to stories that have faded from the headlines. And you'll recall a couple of years ago, there was a massive industrial accident in Bangladesh that took the lives of 1,130 garment workers. And it was a great deal of headline news for a while and coverage. And I often do random unscientific polls. I'm on a university campus now and ask people if they know what Rana Plaza is. And I get people not making the association where my might have been household. So I have to remind them, remember this incident? And a lot of people have just forgotten. And yet I'm willing to bet that in almost everybody's closet in this room, you'll have garments made in Bangladesh. It is the world's biggest maker of garments today. Make in China, it's on the way to overtaking China. So part of what we do is to go back to these stories, so whatever happened to them. And I'm going to show you from now until we get to the end, and then hopefully start mixing it up with a conversation, some examples of the kind of stories that I'm talking about. So this is a small excerpt of the whatever happened to them.
We first met Josna Akhtar last June in a Dhaka hospital. She'd been rescued after spending 2 days under the rubble of Rana Plaza. Doctors said Akhtar was lucky to survive the building collapse that claimed more than 1,100 lives, and fortunate that her spine remained intact. That's not the way she feels today.
Sometimes I wonder how I can continue this life. I cannot do anything. If I bend to pick up anything from the floor, it really hurts. Sometimes I say it might be better to die.
The 19-year-old says she's in almost constant pain, unable to sit or stand for more than a few minutes at a time. We had to interrupt our interview so she could stretch.
I had surgery on my spinal cord, and the doctors said not to do any hard work because that could hurt my spinal cord. They said it could take a long time to heal.
So most days are spent in bed watching TV in the tiny one-room home she shares with her parents and 2 younger sisters. She was a breadwinner until last April. Now she frets being a burden. Her mother, Rahela Begum, also had to quit her garment factory job.
I have to care for her, and there is no way that I can take a job outside of the house. Our big concern is how long she'll be this way, about her future.
They are like millions of impoverished rural families who moved to the capital city in recent years to work in the fast-growing garment industry. That's now second only to China's in size. Josna's father's earnings as a rickshaw puller, about $3 a day, are all this family has. All but the workers, he says, have benefited from an opaque trade that relies on low wages and lacks regulation. After Rana Plaza, the image of many global apparel companies was threatened, says Scott Nova. He's with the Washington, D.C.-based Workers' Rights Consortium.
These are brands and retailers who work very hard to create as much distance as possible between the reality for the workers who make their products and the consumers who buy and wear those products. But an event like Rana Plaza closes that distance. It shows consumers the conditions under which their clothing is being made, and it creates, therefore, strong pressure on the brands and retailers to change their practices.
In In general, he says European brands have acted more responsibly. 153 companies recently signed on to a legally binding multi-million-dollar worker safety accord to inspect and bring all factories up to international building standards. Most big American names did not join this group. A few did.
We have Fruit of the Loom, we have PVH, which owns Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and a number of others. We also have brands that are not US-based, but are household names in the US, like Adidas, like H&M. So some companies involved in the US market are stepping up, but the Walmarts, the Gaps, have not chosen to be a part of this critical process of change, and that is extremely disturbing to watch.
Some experts say liability concerns have kept the American companies from legally binding commitments, but Ravi Mesbah, local head of the US-led group, says just because they didn't sign doesn't mean they've done nothing.
First is a gentleman's commitment. Commitment and understanding and perception. Not necessarily has to be legally binded.
He says his so-called alliance group has hired international and local engineers to do safety inspections at garment factories.
We are trying to engage the workers. We are establishing the outline to listen to their voice. So we will make it as safe as possible.
And the alliance has collaborated with the European-led group on common safety concerns, jointly sponsoring a recent building safety expo, for example. It introduced owners of the 4,000-odd factories to things like fire doors and sprinklers, virtually unheard of in Bangladesh. For their part, factory owners like Shabir Mahmood complained that their international customers have talked about improving conditions, but haven't been willing to pay for it.
Whenever I ask the buyers to give a better price, the buyers say, we'll go somewhere else.
I'm going to stop it there. This is very, very relevant to us. And one of the areas where I think journalism falls down is in not following up. It's our hope to go back to Bangladesh in April, another anniversary, to just see how much follow-up there has been to commitments. It often happens, these are made, and nobody really follows up. Maybe all of these factories are safe and have fire, sprinklers and have fire doors, which were unheard of. But there is no spotlight in the international media watching it. There are some activist groups doing so, and it's very, very complex. The manufacturer there complained about not having any wiggle room, not having any margin because the buyers offer a certain price and dictate what they're willing to pay for garments, and the only wiggle room is with labor costs. Now, how does that concern us? It is, in fact, true that we pay less for our garments today than we did in 1996. Check it out. We live in an age of cheap fashion, disposable fashion, and it's something we ought to think about. Okay, so there's a lot of texture and a lot of layers of complexity that come into the story that seems otherwise so sympathetic. This is a second category of undertold stories, which is our most challenging. It's called a slow-moving disaster. Essentially, the myriad issues that underlie poverty in the world. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but I want to give you a glimpse of the first country that comes to mind, and that's Haiti. And I'll give you a small glimpse of an updated story that from there.
The 2010 earthquake that devastated Haiti may still loom large in Americans' memory, but in Haiti itself, that was at least 3 disasters ago. 4 hurricanes Tomas last year, Isaac in August, and recently Sandy. Each storm brought a grim reminder of yet one more ever-present disaster, the deadly cholera epidemic that started 10 months after the quake.
We've got 3 floods, cholera, and all in the aftermath of an absolutely devastating earthquake. And I was there 2 years before that to cover absolutely devastating flooding in that country. We have a duty to report these stories about a land that is hours flight from Miami. And the challenge in journalism, it's almost deadly in the news business to say, well, it's the same story. Even if the same story is the story, the fact that it is the same story is the story. But it's still the same story. And in journalism, we don't cover the same story unless there are ways to bring a fresh angle. That's where we fight. And we run into another truism that drives so much of what is covered. And that is human suffering does not draw eyeballs to screens, large, medium, or small. Nobody wants to tune in to human suffering. It's just not natural, unless it's our profession to treat somebody, unless we don't, as consumers of media, want to tune in to human misery, which is quite apart from saying that we don't care. There was an overwhelming response after the Haitian earthquake. Emergencies are deceptive. There's a way, there's an urgency, there's a clear path to action, but it's the slow-moving disasters that are most challenging to deal with, because it's the same story. So how do we deal with this? Our approach is what we call solutions-oriented reporting. And it's becoming a force in journalism, particularly in this kind of journalism. And it's an acquired taste in the profession. Because there's a real raw nerve in journalism about being boosterish, fawning, if you will, and solutions-oriented journalism, for reasons that will become apparent with the next slide, just feels like it's not journalistic. It's somehow sugarcoating an issue. But what we're doing is finding people who've had success, empirically measured success. They're not just a cute feature story, and attacking some of these problems. We have a whole collection of stories now that are aggregated, among other places, on the NewsHour's site on social entrepreneurship. We piggyback on the growing movement of people who are convinced that there's a business opportunity and a lot of personal fulfillment in tackling some of humanity's most pressing problems, in education, health, water and sanitation, you name it. And it's not for me as a journalist to say whether social entrepreneurship is going to be a panacea, but I will tell you it's an absolute godsend, because what it does is that it gives us good stories about usually very charismatic individuals who have hefty ideas that they've brought to the field and demonstrated some real success in a prominent idea. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time showing you some very compelling examples to think about the condition of the world today and what people are doing about it. I picked this particular story from others because it's about a young person just out of graduate school who had an idea after he got his MBA, and he applies that MBA until today in the most unlikely place. He was headed probably for a career in finance on Wall Street, and waltzed into it, but instead did this. Here is a couple of minutes of that story.
Next, bringing business services to small-scale farmers in East Africa. Our story is part of a series called Food for 9 Billion. It's a partnership with the Center for Investigative Reporting, American Public Media's Marketplace, and Homeland's Productions. Special correspondent Fred Lazaro reports.
Andrew Yoon was almost done with business school in 2005 when he took a brief vacation to Kenya. It was the Minnesota native's first exposure to the irony of life for millions of people in rural Africa.
The shocking thing, and a kind of an amazing paradox, is that most of the world's hungry people are actually farmers, and their profession is to grow food. The reason they're not succeeding right now is they're still using tools and techniques that literally date the Bronze Age.
He decided to apply his new MBA skills to see if he could help. He began with a pilot project to assist 40 families.
I took $7,000 of my own savings and bought seed and fertilizer and hired some local staff, and we gave it a shot. The families just kind of signed up, and they were also interested, and they had the best harvest of their entire lives in that first season. And right when that happened, I knew that there was something there.
Malambe. Naitwa Andrew. Nafanya kazi na 1 Acre Fund.
This project turned into 1 Acre Fund, named after the small size of most African subsistence farms. 6 years later, a staff of more than 800 serves over 125,000 farm families in Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi.
You look at those bales of seed, for example, that stack of bales is enough to change the lives of thousands of farm families with, more than 10,000 children living in those families. The sheer magnitude of what we can accomplish from a humanitarian perspective with very little resources is just staggering.
Let's stop it there. He began with $7,000 of his savings, and what he essentially did is what farmers in Iowa and Minnesota, and probably Indiana, had a couple of generations ago. He offered that to subsistence farmers. And what were those things? Seed and fertilizer of decent quality, extension services, credit and insurance. Things that farmers in this part of the world take for granted. But if you're a subsistence farmer, you cannot take risks, because if you have a crop failure, you will starve, and your children will. But what he's done is absolutely spectacular in its results. And he is now up to 250,000 families, and they're going up to 1 million by 2020. It is spectacularly successful. Very simple idea, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm for this kind of work among young people like Andrew Yu. Andrew grew up in Minnesota. He puts out, he hires about 10 people like him in any given year. And there are people who are recent graduates from college and from graduate school. And in 2012, when I did this story, he said he had 10 openings and he got 10,000 CVs from around the world of young people wanting these jobs. That's what gives me hope. This is social entrepreneurship that is catching fire among so many young people, because it's showing a great deal of promise. I'd like to show you another promising idea that might address some of the issues we talked about in Bangladesh, which is the problem of underpaid garment workers. We have a story out of the Dominican Republic that I'm going to excerpt for you about a guy who thought he'd try a living wage factory and see if he can make go of it.
Next, a small factory in the Caribbean is trying to buck the trend toward lower wages in the garment industry by making apparel for big athletic programs in the U.S. Special correspondent Fred Lazaro has the story, part of his ongoing series, Agents for Change.
Football is a big moneymaker for the University of Notre Dame. The storied Fighting Irish name is a lucrative brand in the $4 billion a year business of licensed apparel. In the campus bookstore, one display is trying to stand out in a crowded space.
Every garment has a hang tag on it. It has a picture of one of our employees. One of the hang tags says, my son goes to school because of these clothes. Another one might say, I can afford food, clean water, and medicine for my children when they're sick because of your purchase of these clothes.
Joe Bosich founded the Knights Apparel Company in 2001 and built it into the largest maker of licensed college sportswear. These shirts are made in a tiny corner of the Knights empire, a factory called Alta Gracia that pays people like Manuel Guzman a living wage. Unusual does not begin to describe the factory where Guzman works in the Dominican Republic, a Caribbean nation of nearly 10 million where unemployment exceeds 15%. The factory atmosphere is relaxed. music is loud.
There's no pressure here to produce all the time. People come here to train us. Lawyers have taught us our rights. Also, we have a union that protects us.
Maritza Vargas is the union steward. I asked her, are your wages sufficient?
See?
Yes, she responded. They are based on the cost of living for a family of 5, calculated by the country's central bank and adjusted every year for inflation.
Bueno, la educación de mis hijos.
For me, the most important thing is that my children have been able to go to school. I even have my oldest daughter in college.
For Manuel Guzman and his wife, Dina Martinez, this job at Altagracia has meant a healthy diet.
He was jobless for 9 months, and we have 4 kids who don't understand when you tell them there's no milk. So it was difficult. This is such a blessing.
Another blessing they count is this home, in place of a half-built shack that once was here. Workers at the Altagracia factory earn about $3 an hour. It might not sound like much, but that's 3 times the legal minimum wage of the Dominican Republic. And just for comparison, Bangladesh's government just announced that it plans to raise the minimum wage for its garment workers from about 19 cents an hour to about 34 cents per hour. All around the Altagracia factory are empty buildings, reminders of the daunting global competition. Thousands of jobs have moved to lower-cost countries. Altagracia is located in a building that once was a much larger garment factory. Just stop it there. Get an idea of where the jobs are going. They're going from the Dominican Republic, where the legal minimum wage is about 90 cents an hour, to Bangladesh, which raised its rate to 34 cents per hour. And if you watch the stories through their conclusion, and I'm going to show you how to do that at the end of this talk, because it's all streamed online, you'll see that it's actually making a go. They've been in the black as of 2014, which he expected it to do. And it's an interesting experiment to see whether you can sustain with sheer volume and not appealing to anything more than one's compassion, yes, but they're not asking, he says, consumers to pay anything more for Altagracia apparel. We're just sending them a compelling message. And he is convinced, Joe Bosich, who founded this factory, that volume, with volume and efficiency and less turnover, he can make a go of this factory. He's working in particular in the college campus arena to appeal to young people. And so it's an interesting undertold story. Let's see what happens. We need to dog it and follow up.
Next, a small.
I want to talk a little bit about a few other kinds of stories that we do. Some of these are just stories that are relevant to us, and they are unusual. These are agents of change and stories that we need to know about, because they're very different than the kind of stories we've been conditioned to hear from certain parts of the world. And I don't think these will need much introduction, at least this one.
We began a series of reports from Pakistan, a nation that has been gripped for years by political instability, sectarian violence, natural disasters, and poverty. The country is also home to one of the world's largest populations of young people. Special correspondent Fred de San Lazaro recently met with some innovators in the capital, Karachi, who are hoping that generation will fuel Pakistan's rise to becoming a high-tech powerhouse. This story is part of our Agents for Change series.
It's one of Asia's fastest-growing tech startup companies. This team of website developers is on a project for Coca-Cola.
So this is going to go up in 27, 28 different markets.
Umair Aziz, the founder, can name-drop other blue-chip American clients.
Sales, we worked with Amazon in the past, we worked with Microsoft, we worked with Intel.
One secret to his success, actually it's pretty much a secret, period, is where this company, called Creative Chaos, is located. Karachi, the teeming and indeed chaotic commercial capital of Pakistan, a country beset by terrorist violence and political instability, a city that ranks as one of the world's most violent.
We don't want to be out of the race by advertising that we're based in Pakistan. There's a very negative stigma associated with the country.
So prospective customers see nothing on Creative Chaos's website about its location. Technically, it is headquartered in San Francisco. They soon learn that almost all workers are in Pakistan. Once hired, Aziz says his company has never been removed from a job.
People in the US really don't know that there's a world outside of Taliban, and there's a world outside of everything that they hear on CNN and BBC all the time.
It's an...
You'll notice he didn't say PBS. But you went on to watch the rest of the story, you'll see a growing, energetic, and fairly prosperous startup culture under the most daunting of circumstances. Not just the social, the militancy that is raging in this city, but also infrastructure problems, electricity that's not reliable, broadband, where do you get that? And they're working against those daunting odds to make a go of it and doing fairly well, actually. And so it's an unusual story, the kind of story that I'd love to tell, because it just says that amid all of the stuff that's happening, there need to be butchers and bakers and makers in these societies. These people need to get on with life. And there are people trying to make a difference. It's one of the neater stories that we've done because of that. The next one I want to show you is from a country that must rank, even compared to Pakistan, as one of the most dysfunctional places, generally speaking. I'm speaking of Nigeria. And that was where we went for the Undertold Ebola story last year.
The World Health Organization reported today that the Ebola virus has now killed more than 2,800 people in West Africa. The majority of deaths have been in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. But the deadly illness has been relatively contained in nearby and much larger Nigeria, which counts 21 cases and only 9 deaths. Tonight, special correspondent Fred Sam Lazaro takes a look at how Nigeria has controlled Ebola's spread. Fred's reporting is a partnership with the Undertold Stories Project at St. Mary's University of Minnesota.
Not much moves in a hurry in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, also Africa's most populous city. And basic services like roads and covered sewers have yet to reach slums like Otomar. But the Ebola message has. What it is, where to report it, how to prevent it.
You need to wash your hands. It is very, very important for you.
Nigeria's Ebola response has been comprehensive. Communities and the media. There's temperature screening at all the country's entry and exit points. Fever is an early warning sign. And extensive surveillance by public health workers. It's driven by sound epidemiology and the American consul in Lagos, Jeffrey Hopkins, says, fear.
One thing that people really don't want to hear is Ebola and Lagos in the same sentence. This is a city of 20 million people, and a major urban outbreak here could have been apocalyptic. But the response was quick.
One early leader of that response was Babangida Fashola, governor of Lagos State, which includes the city.
On this kind of job, fear is always healthy. If you lose fear, something is wrong.
We'll stop it there. It's an amazing story of how the threat of this virus got everybody to participate, from religious leadership, from Nollywood, which is Nigeria's thriving movie industry, to public health establishment, to foreign NGOs working there. Boots on the ground were deployed immediately, and it will go down in textbooks as one of the more spectacular achievements that we've seen in public health, and it happened in a place you would consider unlikely by its reputation. It is a daunting place, for journalists who are particularly in television. And even this story, a very positive story from Nigeria, was very difficult for us to tell. Starting with trying to get a visa, which is virtually impossible for journalists to get into Nigeria. I actually had to personally go and meet the ambassador of Nigeria to the United States in Washington to convince him that this was a good story. Not to convince him, but for him to just see me, I guess. He said, it's a good story about Nigeria, so I'm going to give you a visa. It's very, very complicated to work in Nigeria. And yet, what can we learn about what works, how we can make things work in Nigeria and elsewhere? A lot in that story. We often look for relevance in stories about agents for change. We try to get a greater sense of what's happening in countries that we know only one-dimensionally, as in China. And one of the things that's happened in China is that it has become the world's factory. And all of the manufacturing that happened in America's Rust Belt, the lock, stock, and barrel, a lot of it, moved to China along with the pollution that comes from that factory, from those factories. With, until recently, a lot less of the controls. And if you're talking about modern factories operating 1970s level pollution regulations that we have here, they would be intolerable in America. What is happening, however, is a real transformation in China, thanks to, particularly, this one organization, a tiny NGO, but it's not the only one, as China comes to grips with its environmental challenges.
As thick smog settled on China's capital today, Beijing issued its first ever red alert. The country's highest possible warning prompted citywide school closings and driving restrictions. The scenes are a stark reminder of the huge environmental price China has paid for becoming the world's factory, a problem experts say the government is now taking seriously. One gauge of that is the free rein given to a non-government environmental group. Fred DeSan Lazaro reports from China as part of his ongoing series, Agents for Change.
The inspectors came calling recently at this massive textile factory in the eastern city of Hangzhou. The plant is part of the Sanyuan Company, one of the icons of China's rapid rise as a manufacturing powerhouse. It produces 2 billion feet of patterned and dyed fabric each year for clothing makers and retailers around the world. This plant also produces some 60,000 tons of wastewater, and a 2013 investigation found it was not being adequately treated. Manager Wang Wei says millions of dollars were invested to upgrade the system.
Today, we invited IPE in to show them our changes, our improvement in environmental protection, so their inspectors can see we are in compliance with government requirements.
But IPE, the inspectors, are not from the all-powerful government. The Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs is a small, non-government organization. IPE founder Ma Jun has won international awards for his environmental activism with no apparent objection from the government. He's used technology and political savvy to take on China's powerful industrial establishment, says Linda Greer of the Washington-based NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, which has partnered with IPE.
I think he's an astute observer of what are the problems and how can they best be solved in China.
Ma was an investigative journalist in the 1990s when he began documenting the toll of China's industrialization, environmental and human.
Like, in those cancer village, a group of old ladies kneeling down in front of me, holding a bottle of polluted water and hoping that they get help. This is the voice that got drowned in this complex, globalized supply chain system.
He says hundreds of millions of Chinese have been exposed to health hazards. In our interview, which occurred right after he injured his lip in a bicycling accident, Ma said things are approaching a tipping point.
If we don't handle that right, this will not just threaten our social stability, but it could hinder the very economic growth itself.
It's not hard to get a sense of public concern, even anger.
The air is not good, and it's getting worse and worse.
At the sidewalk barber shop outside the industrial city of Tianjin, people shared their feelings, though not their names.
You do feel the pollution when you breathe. It's a lot more polluted than before. The water is also polluted, and our food.
The officials are corrupt. People with money can buy favor. Corrupt officials are everywhere.
Ma says there's growing political will in Beijing to tackle the crisis. Standards have been tightened and factories are now required to report their emission levels in real time. IPE then makes this information user-friendly to the public, online and now on mobile. This is a large power plant just outside the industrial city of Tianjin, and it's one of thousands of industrial sites across the country that are monitored, and that information is readily available to anyone who's downloaded the IPE app onto their smartphone. As it turns out, this plant today is well within the range of allowable emissions. As you can see, there are dozens of plants being monitored. Some of them are in the red zone, and the one that we're standing in front of comes in at 33.
If you went on to watch the rest of that story, you'll see an amazing tale of adapting technology in a way that is bringing transparency across China. That people are reporting in violators of emission regulations and with government encouragement. And it's done wonders to bring compliance from these factories. And he's using technology. The next iteration of the IPE app is going to have factory names, and not just factory names, but rather the buyers' names. So if this is an Apple supplier, that name will be connected to the factory, which is a lot of dogged detective work in many ways. But what this organization is doing is quite breathtaking. The worry, of course, is that that transparency is going to make China clean, but is it going to drive dirty manufacturing to paths of less resistance? And that is the worry. Does Vietnam need to worry as it tries to emulate China's economic model? And so on and so forth. I want to abbreviate the rest of this and not show you any more videos, but invite you to go to undertoldstories.org and watch more of the social entrepreneurship stories. Just a glimpse of this story at the time I would show you was about the Narayana health system in India, which is doing spectacular work in cardiac care. We visited a hospital that does 35 open heart surgeries per day, and at a cost that is a fraction of what it costs to have the same procedures done in this country, and at an error rate that is exactly comparable, if not better. How do they manage to do that? And are we going to see more of those kind of ideas migrate globally? Narayana Health has opened a 40-bed hospital in Grand Cayman, which is a 1-hour flight from Miami. And they will do, in a first world setting, which is Grand Cayman, open heart surgery that costs on average $120,000, the Mayo Clinic, which is not one of the most expensive places. They will do this for $40,000 with a demonstrable error rate that's on par. There is a lot going on in the world that is relevant to us at so many levels in so many aspects of our lives. I'm going to skip one of the more interesting stories we did about human trafficking in India simply because it was very, very unusual and not stereotypical of the trafficking stories you typically hear. And just summarize at the end the kind of things that we're looking for in the stories that we do. You'll find typically very strong character-driven narrative. visual, kinetic, some of these things are required no matter what kind of television you do. The solutions orientation in which the problem and the solution can be the story. And is it relevant to current events? And we always look for good news picks. And the Beijing Red Alert was a great peg to air our story about Ma Jun, for example. And that's in pursuit of this goal. And I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions for the time that we have left. Thanks for tolerating me as I try two thumbs to deal with the technology here. So, I'd like to open it up for questions, discussions, and please don't be shy. Yes, okay, great. It's okay. Yes?
Have you ever felt personally threatened? Or in danger?
Not that often, and mostly randomly, not for who we were, beyond a convenient target. I mean, we've been nearly held up in a township in South Africa, for example, but it's not because of anything we were shooting or no ideological reasons, but there were wallets with money and then the telephones and other treasures that they were after. So there's some of that, but not terribly often, actually. And we are very, very guarded about where we go and careful to make sure that we don't overstay our welcome. And get in, talk to the right people, and get out quickly if it's dangerous. In the Afghan-Pakistan border region, for example, one time, my cameraman was freaking out. He's Pakistani from Islamabad. Took a nap in the back of the van as we drove to Peshawar and points west, what we call drone country at the time. There were a lot of drones falling, drone strikes, not drones. And he woke up once we got to the village and said, "How the hell did we get here? We have to leave." And the fixer who helped organize it said, "We have a comfortable 30 to 45 minutes before we can leave." And it's that surprise factor frequently that allows you to do, that allows you access. In this particular instance, we were covering a flood that was devastating all kinds of parts of Pakistan. You could go down the Indus River to more accessible places, but where the relief was not going was to the war-troubled parts, the tribal areas of Pakistan, which were equally badly affected, but people were afraid to go there, and that story needed to get out. And so we were comfortably done in 30 minutes talking to people and out of there. And frequently, I'm not a cowboy looking for adventure. We work and depend heavily on the fixers who know, what limits are and when not to push them. Yes?
Could you speak to more kind of the rationale behind choosing specific stories and where and do you have correspondence with certain individuals, or you obviously can't be in all of the countries at once?
Right. Did you hear that question? Essentially, I'm summarizing. How do you choose where to go? Do you have people in various parts? The NewsHour has a growing stable of people in various parts of the world who do extraordinary work like this and better in many ways. We tend to focus on poverty alleviation, social entrepreneurship, and it's informed by some intelligent things and some seemingly silly things. Frequently, and it's mostly informed by resources and budget. If I'm going to a particular region of the world, I try and have us come back with a bushel full of stories from that region, because it costs a lot of money to fly there with 3 people and to stay there. So when you're there, you want to really optimize your time there. So we'll try and get 4 or 5 stories out of a trip to India or to Southeast Asia, for example, and come back. And on these projects, on the Undertold Stories project, it's just the producer and I on the editorial side doing these videos that you watch it. We're hoping to expand that. I'm on a university campus now and working with the journalism department to broaden the Undertold Stories website, so we get much more material aggregated onto the website, and we're going to, with any luck and fundraising, bring more people into the circle to produce more material like this, because there's a large world out there, and we can do probably 18 to 20 of these per year with our resources. Not awful, but. And this is the university where I am, the University of St. Thomas. These are multiple affiliations. I have a sort of diffuse affiliation. And this is our social. Please do follow us, if you will, on Facebook and on Twitter. And our website is undertoldstories.org. We link to a lot of our work on NewsHour. Other questions or comments? Yes?
What role do students have in Undertold Stories?
Not a lot yet, but we're hoping, at this point, what our goal is to place this content as much as possible or get it into as much curriculum as we can get it into across the disciplines. This is the idea. And when we start producing more material, we'll probably involve them in some aspects of the video production itself. More likely what we'll do, our service learning projects, where we might take a group of students to spend an extended period of time immersed in a social enterprise, trying to get something, some meaningful experience out there, imparting a meaningful service to the enterprise. And that's sort of outside of our department in many ways, and we'll have to coordinate that with others. This is all work in progress and is fairly new. Mostly the students we're hoping will be consumers of this in a targeted audience fashion, because it's very difficult to get this content in front of the younger demographics. Although, once they taste our spinach, a lot of them actually like it. It's just getting it in front of them, under their noses. And you can do that in the classroom a lot more easily. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
You mentioned in your opening comments some embarrassing comments by presidential candidates, and it seems to me that has relevance because there's a groundswell of the fear of outsiders in America, particularly on people that aren't as educated and don't have the inclination to dig into stories. From your travels, do you see that America, what other countries see of America is changing to make us look more favorable? One of the root causes of this religious-based terrorism that sometimes sneaks into America and is perceived as being inspired by that is based upon America as being perceived as supporting for dictators in other countries and things like that. Do you see that changing? You commented about what they see Hollywood, and that's their image of America. But their media is becoming much more sophisticated, as is ours. So do you see that the image of America is changing to where people are less inclined to think that we're just supporting the bad guys and therefore we should, particularly whether it's religious inspired or not?
And I'm going to speak from personal experience, my opinion for what it's worth, and I don't pretend to be a scholar on it, but it's just my sense that a lot of the anti-American fervor, if you will, in some countries, and you can go to places like Pakistan, where I traveled with a producer who was a young white woman, and frequently, she's always covered for her own security and protection. And when we went to the Trident Belt, they said, if you're ever stopped, just say you're with Al Jazeera English. Don't, fess up to anything. At ground level, you're looking at various issues. In part, you're looking at banditry. The anti-Americanism, maybe what the big guys talk about, but essentially, what is a person worth in ransom if we kidnap them? That's a big problem. What you're dealing with a lot, and it's happening in India that we talked about earlier today, growing unemployment among young men. The Middle East has a massive youth bulge of people who are growing increasingly desperate and hopeless, very, very vulnerable to radicalization because of a primary education system that has failed. Period. And so when I look at these issues, it's more, a lot of these young men don't have any sense, they haven't intellectually explored, American foreign policy necessarily. They've listened to stuff that they've heard on social media and been co-opted into something that offers them a path, however you look at that. So, I don't know whether most people that we deal with, have this idea of America that's in any way formed or crystallized in their mind. At ground level, at the trench level where I am, it's much more opportunistic. It's more, what can I do for me? And where can I vent my anger, and who's going to help me do that? Because somebody's got to be responsible for the predicament I'm in. I'm rambling because I don't have a very good answer to that. I don't know who really does, but I don't know whether the view of America has changed radically over the years about American foreign policy. It varies in different countries. It's always been that way. There are certain countries that are supportive of U.S. foreign policy, and there are others that don't, that are not. India, I believe, is one of the countries that ranks highly among those that admire the United States. For example, Pakistan does not, even though they were allies, mostly allies with the Cold War, for example. Some Middle East countries, are just the opposite from one another, even though they may be close to one another. I'm more authority on it. But what I see on the ground, are individuals who are frequently frustrated and angry and but not uneducated. And that's the source of so much of the problems. Yes.
Hi, this is maybe more of an ethics and journalism question. You spoke about fixers, and sometimes fixer says we need to get out of here and we leave. I'm just curious as to, maybe not so much in your personal experience, but in terms of foreign TV crews going overseas, employing fixers for short-term durations on the ground in maybe non-democratic countries. How much leeway does a fixer have to pull the plug versus, let me put it this way, having spent 10 years in China and having done work in the foreign media, I've seen foreign TV crews come in and they want to get their skills. And it's important to them, they're spending all this money to fly in, and they're employing somebody on the ground who oftentimes is freelance, who needs the employment and knows that if they do a good job, in the future they will have further contracts. So as a foreign crew, how much discretion or how much power do you give to a fixer to say, no, this is not a safe situation either for us or for me as a local. Once you leave, I'm not sure what's going to happen to you if the story is either negative or more importantly perceived to be negative in a certain context.
We were just talking about that earlier. It's a very good question, and we've had experiences with people who've been affected by virtue of having worked with us, and it varies from situation to situation. You have to be careful and mindful, and if somebody's if somebody faces a threat of physical harm of any kind, I mean, we'll pull the plug. I have no problem about it, and I'll be backed up by, all the powers that back me up, the powers that be, the PBS system. That said, sometimes you don't even know the fiction that we used for a really politically innocuous documentary in the Democratic Republic of Congo a few years ago got into trouble. Very long story short, we had to get him asylum, and he lives in Minneapolis now. And is thriving in Minneapolis, but it was just indicative to me of, what a needless brain was. He was absolutely brilliant fixer. He knew the system. I'm going to talk about micromanagement because it just tells you how dependent you are on these people. Congo is a very dysfunctional place, and there are flights, that come, whenever they want, not the published times. So we got to the airport one morning to fly from Ujimai to Kinshasa, and the flight, we got there, checked in, they said, the plane's going to be an hour late. Where's it coming from? It's coming from Goma. And Mike would not take that as an answer from the gate, from the agent that we were checking in from. He went to the flight tower and went up there and found out where exactly in the area that flight was. It hadn't been taken over. So he came back and he said, let's go for breakfast. We've got lots of time. The people are resourceful like that, very intelligent, able to thrive in a daunting environment. Just the kind of person that the country can use. Uganda's and Lazaro were just being associated with us, and we had to evacuate from Angola. I've done stories. I've covered the issue of homosexuality in Uganda. Very ticklish. Had to fire a fixer, and that ricocheted elsewhere and brought us into trouble. So it works the other way as well. You can antagonize somebody locally when you're dealing with something that people don't want to talk about. That's uncomfortable. Time for a couple more questions. Yes.
When you started working on this project and exposing yourself to these undertold stories, did you find that you were getting a little too personally involved in some of them and that you wanted to do more about these stories? In so much as you wanted even maybe to talk to your higher-ups to say, can't we spend more time on this?
Well, you learn in my line of work to reconcile with limits. One of the relief valves we have for an abundance of material that can't fit on the broadcast is the online. It can take a lot. It's chopping and dicing and creating more products that takes a lot of stamina, so that's the frustration. But we're always fighting for more time for stories, and unlike the New York Times, which says all the news that's fit to print, on the PBS NewsHour, all the news that fits. 56 minutes per night, and the whole world's news has to be told in that time. And so you learn a sense of perspective in reconciling. And frankly, a lot of it is dictated by how good the material is. Will it keep audience attention? And I've gotten away with much longer stories simply because the material was very compelling, had more people stories, more strong characters. There's another hand. Yes?
What was the focus of the work you were doing in the Democratic Republic?
Well, we covered it for some time. The longer documentary was about an attempt by the world community in 2006 to conduct democratic elections in that country. So it was a massive, massive undertaking to get everybody to vote for a democracy, to install democracy. It was a multi-billion-dollar effort. And everybody felt good for a while. But not much has been heard about it since. And it has deteriorated into, pretty much what it always was. It is a theater in which more lives have been lost than in any conflict since the Holocaust, since World War II. And it's getting pretty close to the Holocaust told, and nobody sort of the DRC, a country that is in the top 5 in the world for some of the most valuable resources on the planet. Copper, diamond, etc. Coltan, which goes into every piece of electronic gear that we use today. Who is trading in this stuff? Where is it going? Who's partnering with them? Congo has the worst statistics. Misery index is high, and per capita income is the lowest, among the lowest in the world, in the richest country in the world. It's a grossly undertold story. It's very hard to tell. It's a very hard country to work in. We've been there a few times since that election. I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you so much. And please sit down.
Sure.